Hey guys, welcome to this week's episode of On the Radar, a little technical roundup here at CNA, and just going to dive into, where the market's sitting now, heading into the end of year period. Things generally start to quieten down. So we'll dive into some charts, we'll dive into what's happening on the macro and talk about what to expect really. I guess the key thing that everyone's sort of calling at now, especially on crypto Twitter, is Santa Claus rally. Everyone wants to see, a little bit of Christmas cheer across their portfolios, understandably. But I guess what's key for the Christmas rally to really take off and be a possibility, specifically with the altcoins here, Bitcoin needs to hold its ground and not really lose any of its footing. And as we talked about last week, we were kind of in this key resistance order block, this pre-bear market area, these large, monthly highs, which do tend to stall the market and sort of force people to make a decision to go higher or lower. We basically have almost spent 3 weeks in this sort of price range, just going up and down, up and down. So for me, if Bitcoin does continue to at least hold the line here, it does kind of set up the idea that we might continue to see altcoins rally. And it's not to say that we haven't seen that trend recently anyway. We've got Fear and Greed up at 74. We're getting to that top-ish end still. But, we've seen assets like IOTEX, Helium, Say, Stacks, they're all up to the tune of plus 30%. IOTEX there. Bit of an outlier, but it just goes to show that even in the last 7 days, there has been altcoins, performing. And a lot of this, specifically around Bitcoin, hopefully holding its ground and pushing higher, could have some impact from some macro news that we saw last week. So we called out essentially that we had GDP, CPI, and also just the Fed announcement on interest rates. And for the first time, we basically had the Fed state that 2024 will be the year of rate drops. They've never really used that language before, which might sound trivial, but these things do matter. Dropping interest rates, risk on assets basically start to perform a bit better. So it's really teeing up 2024 to be probably one of the biggest years we've ever seen in the crypto markets. So yeah, we've got that to look forward to. But look, this week, pretty minimal. We do have GDP data coming tonight in the US. And then we also have potentially some impactful news, PCE. So this is essentially one of the lead metrics that the Fed do use for their interest rate decisions. So, I've got that too Friday. So what's the takeaway here? Volatility essentially is all that you're looking for. So, markets tend to get to stalling points, and something like this can often push the tides one way or the other. So that could be just 2 times and dates to pay attention for the next move in the market potentially. Now, the 2 coins that we're going to touch on today, Solana. So the first one's Solana. This one's obviously just been one of the absolute standouts for the year. I think since September, it's only really seen 4 red weeks. It's been nothing but green. It is coming up to potentially some profit-taking levels. So specifically, we do have that March 22 high, which we've sort of pointed out is still sitting on Bitcoin yet to be taken. But using Fibonacci's, again, they're not mystical, they're not magical. They just can programmatically set levels that traders, investors may decide to reduce some exposure, take some profits. We're approaching the midpoint, so that generally tends to have some reaction in the markets. And what's key for me is we've been in this ascending channel, since the bottom of the bear market. And we're now approaching the top end of that trend line. So once these levels breach, break, hold, retest, go, that tends to be setting up your next big move in the market potentially. So that's setting us up for 2024 likely. So this is pretty key. This is pretty hallmark, but it also we're seeing it right now. It just creates a bit of choppiness, creates a bit of uncertainty. But what's key for me here is if we can sort of hold above this, potentially leading into next week, we could see a push into these levels before the market comes back down to retest this channel as well. So that's a pretty common theme. So that might look something along the lines of this potentially. We don't know what's going to happen, but that's something I'd be keeping an eye on. So potentially 63% move from today's prices up to 134. So we'll see what happens. This is a massive range, but yeah, I just would like to call out that this monthly high might have potentially a bit of confluence to it as well. So we might see price attracted to that level at some stage. It may not be this year, but definitely next year, we might see price get up there. And also to say, if we don't hold this level and we do break under, I would be, potentially looking at this fib as the next support level. If that fails, just looking at previous market structure, it's not unlikely that we could head down as far as $44, $45 US, and also start to retest this mid-trend line as well, potentially as a place to save. So we'll see what happens, but definitely has been a very bullish asset for this whole year. And a bit of an interesting one, Bonk. So it's a bit hard to obviously forecast what's going to happen with a meme coin that's been on this sort of verticality. But, most notably up here, we had the Coinbase and Binance listings. So we definitely did see that blow off toppy sort of price action where it just moved really quickly. The best way to potentially view this one is to I guess look at what's our daily support range from a technical basis. So we do have this range down here, which still is further down. But when price does explode and move up like this, it can be helpful to basically look at this area in between this gap. I like to call it a fair value gap, and draw out the middle of the range there. So that's there. So if we zoom in on a lower time frame, we can see that we've been hopefully finding some support here if you're a bull, if you've got some long exposure here. But what's key for me is that we've even got some overhead resistance. It's failed to break a few times, but right now, we've hit this middle range, we've had a reaction, we've put in a higher high, and now we're coming down to retest this most recent trend line of this channel, this falling pattern wedge as well. So, from here, you could look to target the highs. So that's about a 50% move. But obviously with something like Bonk, if the whole market does see continuation, who knows where this one's going? It's really hard to draw any targets. So just have to be prudent with your risk management, profit taking, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, just wanted to point out that, obviously this one's been a hot one. So anyone who's looking at potentially a place to get in, this might offer technically some sort of basis to enter a trade. But look, other than that, hopefully everyone has a great Christmas. Everyone had a great year in the markets this year, but you've got a lot to look forward to next year. So, rest up, enjoy some time with the family, because there'll be nothing but charts likely for the whole of next year. So we'll see how we go. Thanks very much. Cheers.